Both of these legs were nerve damage where they put electrodes on my nerves to see if they get my legs to work, and they didn't even twitch. This one twitched a little bit, this one didn't. This leg came back kind of supernaturally, naturally. This one never did, and I had a leg brace on this leg. And I would speak to my legs and say, legs move. This leg was a very nice, obedient leg. It would cooperate. This leg would lay there dead as a mackerel. It would move. It's a real bummer when they won't listen to you, you know. And one day, out of the blue, I had no extra feeling, no goosebumps, nothing. I just said, legs move, and my leg was instantly and completely restored. Now, I had never been in a Christian church. I had never seen television. I didn't know about divine healing. I just had anointed ignorance and had this thing. I wanted to get better because I wanted to get out of there and jump out of an airplane again. Yes! Yes! And my leg worked. And this doctor, see, now also, while I was so sick with this ulcer that digested my esophagus, they had, on top of everything else, my esophagus got destroyed, and I couldn't eat food for a year. They had a rubber hose in my stomach, and that's how they fed me for a year. I went through Thanksgiving and Christmas and watching a little Sony TV with a 900-pound turkey, it looked like, and there's just juice coming out of it, and I wanted to eat the TV, you know. And the little cute little candy-striped girl would come in, oh, Mr. Robinson, when we have your dinner, you know, and she'd hang this plastic bag up there, unclip this hose, and this white goop would come down through this hose and go into my stomach. And it didn't even warm it up. You know, it was about 38 degrees. And they had to stretch my esophagus out by pulling this little chrome-plated bullet through this little tiny opening and this much of my esophagus. They said I'd never eat normally. They'd pull that twice a week. I was having these operations. And they had this little green string coming out of my nose because that's what they would attach. And I would tape about 10 miles of tape on my face at night. Because if I swallow that string, they're going to shove that instrument down my throat again. It was like, I thought I was an Ed Sullivan doing a sword swallowing. It was terrible. And so the day that the Lord healed my leg, the doctor, they got to figure stuff out. You know, they got to figure out how they're going to cover themselves. They didn't know how my leg worked because I had a leg brace. I threw it away. My leg is completely restored. So he took me to every clinic in this hospital, the eye clinic, the dental clinic, the radiology. He said, look, we did a new procedure today. He'd pull that string, and I'd kick my leg like this. So, honest. It's a medical miracle, okay? And I had a lot of other things. I mean, I could tell you story after story of impossible things that happened to me physically. But I tell people this almost every place that I go, especially the first time. As sensational as all those things are, to be forgiven of my sin and to have a clean conscience and to be born again and to know that God loves me is greater than any of those other miracles. And I am not just saying this for the sake of effect or an exaggeration. All of those things were just a hint of the love of God. Now, I'm still not only, and for a guy as vain and as cocky as me, I experienced some other things. I didn't really care that much how I looked. And I looked really bizarre back then. I mean, I would cause a lot of traffic accidents when they first let me out of the hospital. I mean, I was really responsible for a lot of insurance problems. But all I wanted to do, I went and jumped out of an airplane again. And, you know, I did. I could barely walk. And it was the only time I was ever afraid. And I wasn't afraid of the skydiving part. I thought I am too skinny to fall. And on the 6 o'clock news, on the weather, they're going to say, we got a cold front moving into Ohio. Hey, who's this guy going across the jet stream? And I jumped, you know, and it was great. And the people thought I was amazing. And my first jump was from 12,500 feet, 60-second delay. And it was great. But it didn't turn me on quite. It was great. Skydiving is fun. I want you to know that. But there was something else that was drawing me. And I began to search. And I began to study every world religion. And certain events were happening. Because I was... You know, I had lost the girl I was engaged to. I had a broken heart that was pretty bad. Anybody ever know what a broken heart is? Did you ever have a broken heart so bad you never think you'll ever be right again? God will heal your broken heart. It's part of His job is to bind up the brokenhearted. And concerning those three things that were important to me, my image, my friends, and my abilities, I literally lost my image. Quite literally. My friends, you know, I was just young and we had a lot of friends and the people, but they got to go their own way and all that. And I lost all of my friends. Abilities, I was reduced to none. And it is dehumanizing when you can't even take care of yourself or your own human functions. But I got those back. And I got another image back. But now as I live, I don't want my image. I want the image of Jesus Christ. And I just don't want my abilities. And I thank God, man. I snow ski. I roughhouse with my kids. I've jumped out of airplanes. I'm still, Don was teasing me tonight. He says, you got to stop thinking you're 16. I like my abilities. I'm grateful for them. But when you can operate in his abilities, you'll know something that no one else can ever know. And friends, I got family all over the world. But I know what it's like to be lonely. About 2 years later, and see, I didn't have any spiritual understanding of what happened in my heart. And a lot of the people, this is back during the peace movement and the hippies in Vietnam, and people were singing about peace and talking about peace, but it wasn't real peace. Now, I identified with the part that they were talking about love and peace and brotherhood and unity, because that was in me. But when I saw people burning down buildings and things like that, I said, that's not me. I had an incident where I was at a concert in Akron, Ohio. There was about 1,000 people there. I was there with some people I knew, and even though I was there, I felt like I was alone. I felt like there was, and I was sitting on the floor in the midst of a break after one of the songs, and I was just thinking, I said, God, there is no one that understands what's going through me. And no sooner were those words, and I just whispered them under my breath, out of my mouth, and I felt pressure on my shoulders. And I looked up, and here's this young woman, long, wavy brown hair down about here, in big elephant bell-bottom pants, tears streaming down her face. She said, God, he's so beautiful. Just take him deeper. See, somehow God heard my prayer and sent somebody. She didn't hear me pray. Nobody could hear me pray. I was praying unto the Lord myself. I didn't even know how to pray. I was just speaking out of my heart. And God was saying to me, I understand everything about you. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I felt waves of love just wash over me. Just wash over me. I had so many other experiences in my life when I had nobody to talk to, and God would show up in my life. And then God began to bring Christians in my life. And I went through a crisis again in 1975 where the Lord was basically saying, if you have nothing, will you follow me? And I went through another breaking. I've had 3 major breakings in my life. This was the second one. He even took the precious woman that I'd been married to for 2 years, and she got deceived or confused and didn't think we had a life together. I didn't care anymore about money. I didn't care about people. All I wanted to do was be right with God. Because even though I experienced all of his love, all of his power, his anointing, his healing, his mercy, I was intermittent with God. You see, people can have experiences with God. People can be born again and filled with God's Spirit and still be on the run from him, or still not know what he wants from you. God wanted more from me than for me to be in heaven with him. And God brought me to a place where I was stripped naked and I didn't care. All I wanted was to be in the will of God. And when I let everything go, he basically says, if you have nothing, will you follow me? And I couldn't hurry enough to say yes. And at that moment, he touched my wife 400 miles away, filled her with the Spirit of God. And what the devil meant for evil, God meant for good. And we have never been apart or out of fellowship. I needed to know something for myself, that there was nothing in this world that could have me. And she needed to know that she had a life in God that was not vicariously through me, that she stood on her own. And God has brought us in. There's many other experiences I had that are very real. I'll just tell you something. I don't claim to understand everything that happened to me, but I understand this. I was blind, and now I can see. I was lame, and now I can walk. I was brokenhearted, and now my heart's filled with love. I was poor, and God's restored to me much more than I have ever dreamed. I'm not talking about money or things. I'm talking about the reality of knowing what really counts. I'm not saying that my life's been easy, and I could tell you some things, and you know that I'm not kidding. It's not been easy. But is it worth it? It's more than worth it. It's the only thing that's worth anything. In the period of time when I really committed to the Lord, and knew that the Lord had called me to do something in a particular way and began to open doors in ministry, a lot of the teaching and the preaching was all about being committed to the Lordship of Jesus Christ. And I'll tell you, I would drive it. If I thought God would sneeze, Barbara and I would go there. By then we had little babies. We'd take them, throw them in the car. We'd go anywhere we thought God would do anything. We'd stay up, read, watch stuff, have people over. Everything was, it was 724, Jesus. and we loved it. And yet this whole thing about being committed, I mean, I felt like we've got to sell out anything. And I believe that in a dimension. But it was a few years ago through a precious friend, I saw another side of that. You know that one of my favorite parables is really one of the shortest ones. There was a man